Welcome to the Cloud Data Integration, Parameters and Dynamic Mappings course. Hello, I'm Laura, and I'll be your guide through this training. At the end of the training, there is a quiz. This quiz is designed to provide direct feedback on your knowledge of the content presented. You are always welcome to go back and review any of the information presented in this course. At the end of the course, you will be presented with a survey. Your feedback is critical to the success and further improvement of our courses. Please take a moment to complete this very important step. Now, let's move on to the objectives for this course. The objectives of this course are: understand the scenarios where parameters can be used. List the different types of parameters. Using parameters in a mapping. And functionality and usage of dynamic mapping tasks. Welcome to the Parameters Overview module. Let's have a look at the following business scenarios. A customer integrates data from several ERP systems worldwide into one cloud data warehouse. The business process is the same for each system, so the mapping built for the integration can be reused. As you know, the mapping contains the connections to the source and target database, but the source connection differs for each ERP system. Duplication of the mapping for each source system is not an option because of maintainability. The solution: use a parameterized source connection. Another scenario: a process needs to read only the changes to source application data since the last time it ran. Instead of reading all source data and filtering what you don't need, you want to create a more resource-efficient process. A parameter keeping the last runtime in the source selection statement will solve the issue. A third scenario: again, a process integrating data from multiple sources, like the first scenario. The complicating factor is that the source systems use different categorizations for payments, which defines which ledger they need to be allocated in the cloud data warehouse. For some sources, one payment category refers to one ledger; for other sources, multiple payment categories need to be allocated to the same ledger. A parameterized expression statement to allocate the ledger will bring the required flexibility. These are just 3 examples where parameters solve the implementation problems. Of course, there are many more. Mappings can use parameters almost everywhere, from connections to file or table names, expressions, join and filter conditions, selection criteria in source or lookup queries, etc. You can specify a parameter as input or inout. An input parameter is a static value specified for a mapping run. Think of the connections, table names, expressions, etc. Input parameters support various types, as shown here. Note there is no numeric or date type for input parameters. If you want these, specify them as string and convert them to the required data type in the mapping. An inout parameter is used to persist a value to be used for a subsequent mapping task run, like the last run date in the second use case. You can use functions in the mapping to set the inout parameter for the subsequent run. The inout parameters support the following types, including numeric and date time. The aggregation type of an inout parameter determines how a task calculates the parameter's current value at runtime. There are 3 aggregation types: min, max, and count. To set the parameter value in a task run, you use the variable functions. You can use the set variable to set the inout parameter to a specific value for min and max parameters. Use setMin variable and setMax variable functions to compare the inout parameter with the value from the mapping and keep the highest or lowest. Use setCount variable to increment the inout parameter by 1 for count variables. The variable functions and the aggregation types define the final inout value at the completion of the mapping task. The retention policy determines whether to retain the value for subsequent runs based on the task status. Welcome to the Parameter Usage module. You can specify the parameters to use while building the mapping. There is no need to define them beforehand. All parameters will show on the Parameters pane, as shown here. In the Parameters pane, you can add, delete or modify parameters if needed. Depending on the parameter type, you are presented with different configuration settings. For example, if you specify a connection parameter, you must specify the connection type. Connection and data object parameters have an extra option called allow parameter to be overridden at runtime. When you use these parameter types, you specify a default value for them in the mapping task. When this option is set, you can override these default values in a parameter file. Expressions can be non-parameterized or parameterized. A non-parameterized expression can still contain parameters, as shown in this example. If the customer's country equals USA, then the parameter expr ledger is used to populate the fields, otherwise, it contains the string value L non-US. The parameter expr ledger is specified as a string parameter. A parameterized expression has the complete expression logic specified in the parameter. The parameter is of type expression. In the mapping task or in the parameter file, the expression is specified. In this example, when the customer's country is USA, Canada, or Mexico, then the output is North America, otherwise, it is set to other. You can run the mapping manually or create and run a mapping task in task flow. Running the mapping using the Run button will prompt you to enter the values for the parameters used in the mapping. Enter the required values, click Run to execute the mapping, and check the parameter substitution during execution. A mapping task gives you the same option to enter the parameter values, but you can also use a parameter file. The benefit of using a parameter file is that you don't have to change the mapping task when a parameter value needs to change. The parameter value in the parameter file precedes the value defined in the mapping tasks. If a parameter is not specified in the parameter file, the value from the mapping task is used. A parameter file looks as follows. Although you can specify parameters for multiple mappings and mapping tasks, or even use one parameter file for all tasks in a project, the best practice is to have separate parameter files for each task flow or mapping task. This parameter file sets the values for the two parameters defined in the mapping, as shown here. Line 2 in the file specifies the project, folder, and mapping task. Lines 3 and 4 set the values for the two parameters. Note that all parameter names in the file are prefixed with $signs. There are some important considerations when working with parameters and parameter files. This may affect your design, so be aware of these. First, the only input parameters you can override using a parameter file are connections, data objects, and source queries. For other types, you can specify the value in the mapping task, but you cannot override them in the parameter file. However, if you want to use a string or numeric parameter in the mapping and override it using a parameter file, define the parameter as inout and check the checkbox for as expression parameter. You can now override it using a parameter file. Ensure you specify the value as an expression. Second, inout parameters are stored in the IDMC repository and linked to a mapping task. So if you have multiple mappings tasks for one mapping, each task uses its own parameter value. You can reset these if necessary in the parameter pane when editing the task. Time for some exercises. In the first lab, you will use input parameters for a mapping and mapping task to run it for two different source systems. In the second lab, you will use inout parameters and a parameter file. Click on the buttons to start the exercise. After you have completed the labs, please move forward to the next section.
In this lab, you will create a mapping with two input parameters. In the mapping tasks, you will set the parameter values to have the mapping run for two different source systems. Click New to start the exercise. Click Mappings. Click Create. Click the Name field to change the name. The mapping canvas shows the source and target objects. Click the source to configure it. Click the Source tab in the Properties pane at the bottom of the screen. Click the Connection field to select the connection to use. Although you will parameterize the connection later, Selecting a connection now will import the metadata into the mapping. Click the connection C2C_MSSQL_ERP_US. Click Select to select the source table. Select the table customer_complete and click OK. Next, click the target object in the mapping canvas to configure it. Click the Target tab in the Properties pane. Click the Connection field to select the connection to use. Select the connection C2C_MSSQL_target. Click Select to select the target table. Select the table DWH_customer_complete, the second from the bottom. Click the expression icon in the transformation toolbar to drag it into the mapping canvas. Click the expression to configure it. Click the Expression tab in the Properties pane. Click the plus sign on the right to add an output field. Click the Name field to change the name. The name is changed to ERP_country. The data type string and the precision can be kept default. Click OK to save the field. Click Configure in the Expression column to create the expression. Click the Fields pull-down menu to change it. Choose Parameters. Expand the Input Parameters group. Click the plus sign to create a new parameter. The parameter is named parm_ERP_country. And the type is string. Click OK to save it. Click the parameter to add it to the expression. Click OK. You see the completed expression at the bottom of the screen. Click on the target in the mapping canvas. Click Field Mapping in the Properties pane. Click the Automap button on the right-hand side. Choose Exact Field Names. The field mapping is complete. You can see all mapped fields in yellow. The final thing to do is parameterize the source connection. Click on the source in the mapping canvas. Click the Source tab in the Properties pane. Click the New Parameter button to the right of the connection field. The parameter is called param_source_connection, and the parameter type is connection. Click the Connection Type field to set the database type. Choose SQL Server. Click OK to save the parameter. The mapping is now complete. Click Save to save it. The next step is to create the mapping task containing the parameter values. Click the ellipsis on the top right of the screen to start. Select New Mapping Task. Click the task name field to name the mapping task. The task name is mount_ERP_to_DWH_US. This task will process the data from the US ERP system. Select the runtime environment. Select the local CSA group. Click Next. Here you set the value for the source connection parameter. Click the field to choose the required connection. Choose the connection C2C_MS. Click Next to go to the Input Parameters page. Click the text box to set the value for the ERP_country parameter. You see the value US entered and closed in quotes. Click. The schedule page lets you assign a schedule or enter email options. No need to do this here, so click Finish to save the mapping task. Click Run to run the task. Click My Jobs in the pop-up to monitor the progress of the task run. The run is successful. Now, let's check the output by clicking on the remote desktop icon in the Windows taskbar. In the SQL Server client, the query result for the target table shows the column ERP_country populated with the parameter value US. Click the Minimize button for the remote desktop at the top of the screen. Go back to the mapping M_ERP_to_DWH to create a second mapping task. This task will process the data from the GB ERP system. Click the ellipsis at the top right to create the mapping task. The task is called mount_ERP_to_DWH_GB and the runtime environment is the local secure agent. Click Next to configure the source connection parameter. From the pull-down menu, select the connection C2C_MSSQL_ERP_GB. Click Next. Click the text box to set the value GB for the ERP under. The parameter contains the value GB, enclosed in quotes. Click Next. Click Finish to save the mapping task. Click Run to execute the task. The task is successful, and you see 10 rows processed. Check the output by clicking on the remote desktop icon in the Windows taskbar. The query result for the target table shows 10 rows added, all with the ERP_country GB, as specified in the parameter. This concludes the exercise. Click Next to return to the presentation. In this exercise, you will use two in-out parameters and a parameter file. The mapping M_ERP_incremental is already created and the parameters pane is open. Click on the plus sign in in-out parameters to create a new parameter. Click the name field to name the parameter. The parameter parm_cust_id will keep track of the highest customer ID processed. Click on the data type field to change the data type. Select integer. Click the text box to set a default value. The default value is 0. Click OK to save the parameter. Click on the source in the mapping canvas to configure it. Click the Source tab in the Properties pane. Expand the query options. Here you will configure that the process will only read the customers with a customer ID greater than the last processed. Click the Configure text for the filter field to do. Click on the Not Parameterized text in the Filter Condition field. Select Advanced to enter a filter condition containing the parameter. Click on the arrow next to the table customer_complete to view the fields. Click Add next to the field cust_id to add it to the condition. Click the filter condition field right of the cust_id to complete the condition. You see the greater than sign is added to the condition. Now, let's add the in-out parameter. Click the Fields pull-down menu. Select Parameters. Expand in-out parameters. Click the parameter parm_cust_id. Click OK to add the condition to the source query. Click the little blue ellipsis between the source and the target to add a transformation. Select an expression. Click the expression in the mapping canvas to configure it. Click the Expression tab in the Properties pane. Add a field by clicking the plus icon. The output field is named O_cust_id. Click on the Type field to change the data type. Select Integer. Click OK to add the field. Click Configure to create the expression for the field. Click the Fields pull-down menu. Choose Built-in Functions. The functions to manipulate parameters can be found in the Special Functions group. Click on the arrow to expand it. Select the setMax variable function. The function is added to the expression editor, but it's not yet finished. Click the Built-in Functions pull-down menu. Select Parameters to add the in-out parameter to the expression. Select parm_cust_id. Now, add the input field to the expression. Click the Parameters pull-down menu to go to Fields. Choose Fields. Add the field cust_ID to the expression by clicking on the Add text next to the field. The expression is now complete. It selects the highest of the parameter and cust_ID, and stores that in the parameter. The output field O_cust_ID will also contain the value. Click OK to save the expression. Let's add another field to the expression. Click the plus sign. The field is called ERP_country and it is a string. Click OK to continue. Click Configure. You will specify the ERP_country value in the parameter file. To get it into the mapping, you must use an in-out parameter. Click on the plus sign to add the parameter. The parameter is called parm_country, and it is a string. Click the checkbox next to his expression variable. Click OK. Click the parm_country parameter to add it to the expression. The expression transformation is now complete. Click on the target in the mapping canvas to set the field mapping. Click the Field Mapping tab. Click the Auto Map button. Use exact field names. Click the source in the mapping canvas to parameterize the source connection. Click the Source tab in the Properties pane. Click the source connection to change it. Choose the parameter param_ERP_connection. The mapping is now complete. Click Save. Click the ellipsis on the top right to create a mapping task. Choose New Mapping Task. The task is called mount_ERP_incremental_GB, and the runtime environment is the local secure agent group. Click Next to configure the rest. Set the default value for the connection parameter. You can override it in the parameter file. Choose the connection C2C_MSSQL_ERP_. Click Next to configure the in-out parameters. The in-out parameters used in the mapping are listed here. You can set default values or reset values to their originals. Click Next to continue the configuration. You set the parameter file location on the schedule page. Scroll down to find it. You can also download the template, as shown here. Use the template to override the parameters you want and save it. The parameter overrides are shown here. The parameter file is stored local, in a directory accessible by the Cloud Secure Agent. You can also choose to store the parameter files in your cloud ecosystem, by selecting Cloud Hosted. You can then point to a cloud file system like Amazon S3. Click the parameter file directory name to set it. Next, set the parameter file name. Click Finish to save the mapping task. Run the task by clicking the Run button. Click My Jobs in the pop-up window to monitor the task. The run has finished, and it processed 10 rows. Click the task run to view the details. This screen shows the run details, and you can download the session log. It also shows the values of the parameters. The cust_ID parameter changed from 0 to 179, the highest customer ID processed. Click the remote desktop icon in the Windows taskbar to check the results in the database. The target table shows the ERP_country value taken from the parameter file and the cust_IDs. The highest processed is 179. Click Next to continue. Now, let's rerun the task and see what happens. Click Run. The run has finished and it processed 0 rows. Is this what you expected? Click the task run to see the details. The details show 0 rows processed and the parameter for cust_ID still at 179. Click Download Session Log. The session log shows here. In the mapping, you added the parameter cust_ID to the filter in the source query. The executed query is shown further down in the log. Here is the source query. The where clause is not shown, so click on the scroll bar to scroll right. Here you see the where clause added, as specified in the mapping. Since there are no cust_IDs greater than 179, no rows were processed. This concludes the exercise. Click Next to return to the presentation.
Welcome to the Dynamic Mapping Tasks module. The exercise about input parameters showed one solution for reusing the same mapping for input from 2 countries. You created 2 mapping tasks and executed them. But what to do when you have 10 or 20, or even more countries? A dynamic mapping task lets you create multiple jobs for one mapping, either in parallel, in sequence, or a combination. For each job, you specify the parameter values in the job definition. Dynamic mapping tasks do not support parameter files. Having one dynamic mapping task instead of many separate tasks reduces the number of assets to manage, thus reducing maintenance costs and effort. You can use standard or advanced mappings in a dynamic mapping task. Dynamic mapping tasks contain jobs for each mapping run you want to execute. Each job contains the parameter settings used in the run. You assign jobs to a group. A group will execute all assigned jobs in parallel, while groups are executed in sequence. Having too many jobs in parallel may overload the execution environment or cause issues in the target environment, so you must check how many jobs you can put in a group. When you have multiple groups in a dynamic mapping task, all jobs in a group must finish before the next group starts running. For each job, you can set execution options like pre- or post-processing commands or advanced session properties. Based on the parameter type, you can also set advanced options. For example, on a connection parameter, you can set pre- or post-SQL, un-SQL override, or a schema name. You can enable or disable jobs in a group, or even complete groups. For example, if you know there is an issue with the database for the US ERP system, you can turn off the job so it will not be executed in the next run of the dynamic mapping task. Let's do an exercise. In the following lab, you will create and execute a dynamic mapping task for the mapping created earlier. Click on the buttons to start the exercise. After you have completed the labs, please move forward to the next section.
This is the final exercise of this course. In this exercise, you will create and run a dynamic mapping task for the mapping M_ERP_to_DWH you created in the first lab. Click New at the top left to start. Click Dynamic Mapping Task. Click Create. The task is named DMT_ERP_to_DWH. Click the Runtime Environment field. Dynamic mapping tasks can run on secure agent, advanced, or serverless environments. For this exercise, choose the local secure agent. Click Select to choose the mapping. Select the mapping M_ERP_to_DWH. Click Select. Click Next to configure the parameters. The parameters are shown. The parameter scope field has two possible settings, default and local. Default means that the parameter value will be copied to all jobs you create on the next screen, but you can still override the value. Local means that all values must be assigned per job. For this exercise, keep them local and click Next. Click the plus sign to add a group. The group is created and enabled, and its name is the default. Click the plus sign to add a job and assign it to this group. Click the job name to change it. This is the job for the US ERP system, so it is named US. Click the group field to assign it to the group. Select group _1. Now, let's set the parameters for this job. Click the parameter value field for the connection parameter. Choose the connection C2C_MSSQL_ERP_US. Click the value field next to the country parameter. Enter the value US, enclosed by quotes. Next, click the plus sign to add a second job. Similar to the first job, you have added the second. Check the connection parameter and the country value to ensure they both point to GB. Click Next. The Runtime Options panel doesn't need changes. Click Save to save the task. Run the task. Click My Jobs in the pop-up to monitor the progress. The monitor window shows two subtasks created. Click on the two tasks link to see the details. Both jobs finished and have processed 10 rows. Click on the remote desktop icon to check the results in the database. You see 20 rows loaded in the target table, 10 for GB and 10 for US. The dynamic mapping task gave the expected result. This concludes the exercise. Click Next to return to the presentation.
Cloud Data Integration, Parameters and Dynamic Mapping Summary. In this course we covered understanding the scenarios where parameters can be used, listing the different types of parameters, using parameters in a mapping, and functionality and usage of dynamic mapping tasks. Now, it's time for some review questions. Topics covered by the Cloud Data Integration series include concepts and architecture, predefined tasks and mass ingestion, runtime environments, mapping design and development, parameters and dynamic mappings, and hierarchy processing. There will be a comprehensive assessment at the end of the 6 courses. You must score 80% to pass the Cloud Data Integration series. Thank you for completing the Cloud Data Integration, Parameters and Dynamic Mappings course. Please click the Exit button to complete this training.